I was just going to say that the A2 pawn is a long-term target. The B pawn just holds it down. So you could see ideas of just doubling on the A line and
Oh,
making this weak.
tactics.
And yeah, we saw, yes, because the knight, just to rewind just tiny bit, knight comes here. It's threatening knight to h6. So that's why you can't grab that rook.
The rook is
That's why bishop
safe.
takes, knight is forced. Yeah. And
Bishop takes.
now, now this rook has to move. Either that or you're going g3 and trying to get those tempo moves going on.
I think my nerves have had enough, and I just want to play g3 and just resolve and be nice and calm and quiet and stop fighting with each other. But okay, so what have we got now that the dust is settled? We have a knight and bishop for white versus the bishop pair for black. Admittedly, space is a little bit of a concern. G3 played. Okay, great. Space, a little bit of a concern in the short term for black. And now we're setting to work targeting the isolated pawn on d4. There's no easy way for black to defend b4 just yet, though, because c5 runs into d takes c5, eliminating a weakness and isolating the b pawn again. So it doesn't look like it's completely straightforward. But now I feel like we're in a situation now where, if I may say so, when I'm thinking about what plan to follow and how I need to think about my next 5 moves, it now feels easier to come up with a plan for black than for white.
Totally agree with you there, because first point for white is how you're going to defend d4. All right, so you could step up. Okay, see, I think he had to go d5 because if he stepped up with the bishop to e3, then the rooks could swoop in on that weak a pawn and just simply win that one. So d5 makes a lot of sense. Vincent, after all, he is a pawn up, but Fabiano does have the bishop pair as compensation. And I tell you something, the bishop pair are magnificent in a position such as this. It's open, the white king is in danger, it's on an unopposed, the square of the unopposed bishop. So I'm expecting that we might see, I was thinking c5 or g.
Yes! Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I was waiting for you to tell me off because there was a big... My 3-minute brain was going all guns blazing, going, haha, you played d5. I'm just going to play c5 and finally protect that pawn on b4. But you are giving white a passed pawn, and your pawn on c5 isn't a passer yet. So you have to be really quite sure that's a good idea to play a move like that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, because yeah, it carries a lot of risk because you're banking on the power of the past c pawn, but white also has a trump too and a square for the knight to jump to. So c5 carries a lot of risk, and it would depend on whether Fabiano wants to eliminate the tension. There was something interesting that he said, that the older he got, the more he realized that people couldn't hand tension. And so he was trying to play these days with as much tension in the position. So I suspect he might just leave the pawn there on c6 and keep the option open for him to take on d5 whenever he wants to.
And that's, well, you called it. The options are open. The bishops come back to d7. This is very, very interesting indeed. Looking for ways to maintain the tension in the position. And maybe if we think about the story of the game and how let's think about how Fabiano wants to approach this, right? If we go back, we don't have to go back on the board, but if we think back to the positions where f5 got played and it was super tense and all sorts of things were on pre, and the order in which pieces and pawns got taken became critically important because there were all sorts of counter threats and attacking chances everywhere. Maybe since then, Fabiano has seen, hang on a second, Keymer might have played a couple of inaccuracies, and I'm not winning, but I feel like I can goad him into a mistake as we start to reach the time control. So I think Fabiano here is playing with the voice of experience and saying, I feel like if I keep playing accurate moves, maybe the position is fairly equal now, or with some imbalances, but not winning, but I think I can squeeze that extra mistake out of it.
Yeah, and there we saw that Vincent step back with the knight targeting b4. The question for Fabi, how is he going to defend b4? Again, it's very natural to rook coming in to
But
c2. This bishop can get involved in the fight as well. So it does carry a lot of risk with it, but Fabi is just saying that yes, you can take the pawn, but he's hinging everything on the fact that this d pawn can advance, and it's a powerful pawn as well.
so I guess what we're playing at here is that yes, you've got two connected pass pawns on the queen side, but because the d pawn is more advanced, I guess we're saying it's as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the pair you have there, which means that an inaccuracy from Fabiano that allows that pawn to be taken for any reason would be disastrous for him at this point. And on an open board with 4 rooks still there, and with his opponent with the pair of bishops, the scope to go wrong, especially when both sides are under a minute, is scary.
Yeah, and Vincent under 16 seconds now, and he has to take a decision with the rook. And like you said, the bishop's on the board. There's so much danger, and it's all about the quality of pawns. Oh, that's a double question mark. That's a blunder. Oh, wow.
Practical decision from Fabi here, trying to elicit a mistake. That is the mistake. Will we see it, though? And it's because of rook e7?
Yeah. The rook is just simply removing the defender of e1. You cannot take the rook.
Oh, that's
because
gross.
Of this swish and tick. Rook takes c1. Oh.
Practical decision making.
Nasty.
Really practical by Fabi, keeping the opportunity to make a mistake on the board.
Totally.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
I mean, he sees it. He's calculating. He's making sure.
He doesn't have too much time, John. This is a kind of easy move to miss. You remove the rook, bishop to g5. He finds it.
He finds it. Big moment. And now, with 30 seconds left, look, the bad news is that this is a tricky position. The worst news is that you've got less than 30 seconds to think about your response. Vincent Keymer here being backed into a corner by Fabiano Caruana, trying his best and perhaps succeeding here in getting his opponent into tricky situations in time trouble. Rook e7 played, under 10 seconds left. Keymer needs to try something. 4 moves until the time control. Bishop d2 has been played. Instant response from Fabi. Exchanges on the board, and now we have a blue arrow on our screen for a follow-up.
Yeah, and it's all to do with the fact that the bishop on e1 is on the same line as the king. We have bishop to e5 being indicated. Rook to c1 is the big idea. You just need to be materialist about it. And Fabi, he just has to keep calm, defend the bishop. He can even take the pawn on b2. That's fine. And there we see Faustino Oro coming to take a look. Such a critical moment. Wei Yi also looking at Fabiano's game because the drama is happening right here. Big moment. Bishop to e5 is clinical. The best bet after bishop to e5 is just simply to go bishop to d2 and just give up the exchange. But
wow,
he finds it, of course.
And now the rook ideally wants to protect the dark squared bishop on e1 because rook c1 is coming in, but he can't do that. The bishop pair is too strong. The bishop on b5 is protecting the f1 square, and that is the reason why at the end of this combination, Vincent Keymer is in a world of hurt. And he's down to 35 seconds to work out what he wants to do here. But to find bishop d2, to accept that you have to go down and exchange just to survive, to live and fight another day, that is absolutely brutal. And white doesn't even pick up the pawn on d5 at the end of it. That's the kicker.
No, he doesn't. That pawn still very much remains alive. And not much time for Vincent. He has to keep calm, not panic, and just understand, okay, he offers up a trade of bishops. But here for Fabi, it's all about just picking up that rook. And of course, he does it. And there we see the rook can actually just slide up to c4 and start attacking the pawn on
Oh,
f4.
nice.
Because the pawn on d5 is
Can't be
untouchable.
taken.
Because if you capture it, this bishop will step back to c6, and that is
Wow.
a deadly pin.
So the pawn can't be captured. The pawn islands have been disrupted on the king side. H and F pawns both isolated. The king is now marching up, and Caruana smelt blood before, gave Keymer the opportunity to go wrong, and you can see the shift in his body language. He's looking away from the board a little bit. He's relaxed. He's not quite sitting up as straight. He realizes the time for tension is over, and now he needs to consolidate. King F7 was move 40. They will have additional time. So, oh my goodness, what a flurry of moves, and what a critical mistake under immense pressure from Grandmaster Vincent Keymer. I don't think anyone can blame him for making the moves that he did. So many of them looked perfectly human, reasonably good shots at trying to win the game, and objectively now, it's Fabi's.
Yeah, he just lost his way in the complications, and the position was just incredibly difficult for both sides. And you can see the emotion there, John, as he shakes his head, as he thinks about what just happened, how the position fell apart so quickly. Well,
I hate this sort of moment. Like, I'm sure so many top players, yourself included, must have experienced this at some point, Yovi, where you spend so much time and effort to blitz your way to get to the time control just to give yourself an awful lot of time to think about where it all went wrong. It's one of the most horrible feelings in chess, I think it's fair to say.
it certainly is that moment when the fog has cleared and you understand the adrenaline has left your body, and you just understand what you did to your position and that there's no way back from this. And for Vincent, unfortunately, his position maybe would have been salvageable if the presence of that D pawn was not there. You know, if there was no D pawn, he could maybe just survive by holding the queen side. But as it stands, it's just a straightforward plan now of just advancing the D pawn, supported by the rook, the bishop, the king, and it is game over. I mean, very, very difficult position here.
If it wasn't for the D pawn, I would be reminding our audience of Nordebek versus Gukesh, and how at several moments during that game, we were thinking Gukesh has got a trick or two up his sleeve here. Nordebek hasn't fallen for it again. Unfortunately, it is just a matter of time until we see a resignation, and yet he found resource after resource after resource. And I think something like that could be possible in this game if it weren't for the fact that that D pawn is so damn strong. So I'm not sure what resource to reach into a bag of tricks and look for here if I'm Vincent Keymer, but this is looking very, very one-sided, unfortunately, from this moment on, and he knows it. He's going to continue to look. He's got 45 minutes to find it, so even if there's only one line, even if there's a needle in a haystack, it is now his job to cast the past out of his mind, to hunker down and look for it and find that continuation. But I tell you what, if that exists, we can't see it. The eval bar can't see it. The engine can't see it. This is tricky. But it's a perfect time to set a trap if one exists.
If one exists, and that's unfortunately the case. So you can't capture on d5, unfortunately for white, because of bishop to c6. So it might be worth starting with king moving to g1. Move the king to g1 and see what happens. Because the more pawns that get traded off, the closer you step towards the draw. Unfortunately, for Vincent, it's difficult because there's a series of pawn imbalances. It's not just the fact that Black has a passed D pawn, it's also the fact that should he win this pawn, F pawn, then he can start to promote or start to push these kingside pawns, and they will
Right.
cost White some material. But you don't have to play for exchanges. You can step up with the king. And it's very difficult to get motoring with the white pawns as well. You can't go b3 because this bishop hangs. This bishop needs to be anchored to a square by this b2 pawn. And then this just simply leaves the a pawn to run. And that is stepping nowhere as this bishop is in full control of that square. So it's just a difficult position, I would say, all round.
That's a great summary, Yovi. I feel like if maybe the pawns on the other side of the board were on the G and H files, for example, like they were on, I don't know, G3 and H4 or something, and White can maybe maneuver the knight from C2 to D4.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a universe there where you get to shuffle and hold a draw. But because you can't connect those F and H pawns, you're then having to work double time, not just to stop the D pawn from queening, but also to stop your F pawn from getting taken. And if you can't do both of those things at the same time, then something's going to fall and you're going to have two weaknesses as once. And that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately. And rooks, they work so well in open positions. They're long-range pieces. They can switch from side to side. And that's something that becomes incredibly apparent in endgame. So, yeah, I'm kind of predicting that Vincent might play a few moves just to resettle himself, because tomorrow it is a rest day. It's difficult to accept that you're going to go into the rest day losing, so you might as well play a few moves out of inertia and see what you can do. This is the best mindset when you're defending a lost position. You just have to accept the result. It's just take it for granted that you're going to lose, but can you find the path of most resistance? And for Vincent, I think it involves just stepping up with the king and seeing whether Fabiano gets tempted to make some trades with the d4 and tries to win the f4 pawn, because maybe then he has some chances of holding a draw.
Maybe. This is, I guess I'll leave on one more question for you, Yovi. I imagine the best thing to do if you make the time control and you're in a worse position, it's really easy for us to say, or for any other player or any of the spectators to say, the best thing you can do is like cleanse your mind and just focus on the objective position. But it's so difficult not to think I've screwed this up somewhere, or there was a critical moment, I should have done something else. What advice would you give a player who's beating himself or herself up after making the time control in a worse position? Like, what can you possibly say to them at this point?
Well, I think you have to look at the bigger picture, right? And I think that's the only way to contextualize it. You go and say, well, ultimately, in the big scheme of my chess career, a loss or a difficult position isn't the biggest thing in the world, right? When we think about all the world's problems and we just go, okay, this is just a chess
True.
game. This is just a bad position. Let's enjoy the moment. Let's see what we can do. And if you actually turn it around and don't kind of spiral down, or what could have been, oh man, this is so difficult. Instead, you just go, it's a challenge. Can I save it? Can I not? Let me just be very mindful of the fact that what you're thinking will often transform into actions. So
Treat it as a puzzle. White to play and draw. What's the continuation?
right, exactly. And I mean, I remember one game I had where I could barely make a move. Seriously, it was so bad. And I looked outside and I thought, life is actually really beautiful. Like, and I went and I smiled, and people came and looked at my game because they saw me smiling like the Cheshire Cat, and they were like, "Why are you smiling? Your position stinks." and so, and then during this thought, I thought, hang on a second, I can set a trap. And so I set the trap, and my opponent fell into it, and I won. And yeah, I was very lucky. And John, your prediction game has been almost like 100% here. You can call it.
No.
Relocate the knight c2, put it on d4. At least there is a trap there in the position. If Caruana rushes with the king to
Oh, don't.
e6, well, then the knight will spring to d4 and snatch off that bishop. Stranger things have happened. It's very, very, very unlikely, but it's not impossible.
You're very right. I mean, you have to now start playing with every resource you have at your disposal. But also, without the quick tactics, blockading the passed pawn also just seems like a very sensible thing to do to try and hold the game elsewhere. So, fair play to him. So now Fabi has to think of the most accurate continuation forward if he wants to convert this. Every single game, ladies and gentlemen, has now met the time control. So all players have had